Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Learn how to achieve financial freedom with as few as 4 single-family homes and with long-term tenants. This tactic does not include the high maintenance of short-term rentals or conversions to an assisted living home, which is really like a business. This innovative technique even works in such an unlikely part of the nation. Also, take a person that's $20 million in debt. Why is that person probably a financial winner? Today on Get Rich Education. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your EQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an EQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Tallahassee, Florida to Talkeetna, Alaska, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education, back for the 332nd consecutive week here to help you build your wealth. You know, being one of those, long-running shows here with a substantial listenership, we attract all those best-known names to come alongside me here on the show, Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki and so on. But a while ago, I listened to your feedback. You told me that you love hearing from those type of guests because sure, that's great wisdom. But you also told me that it can be difficult for everyone to relate to people with 8-figure or 9-figure net worths, and that it helps you if I bring more of a Get Rich Education listener like you onto the show because that is more relatable. And that's what we're doing here today. We're going to talk with a young investor that's been doing real estate for about 5 years now. He works full-time as a pharmacist, and he has created almost $11,000 in cash flow per month. So that's an extra $120 to $130K per year for him. And he's doing it with just 4 single-family homes. And his properties are about a 1-hour drive from where he lives. He self-manages, so we'll be sure to find out how often he physically has to visit his properties and just how he does all of this. His name is Ryan, and we're going to get back to him in a moment. But first, now, like most winners do, you're going to find out that he began by taking on a good chunk of smart debt, of course, because that's how you can control more. So, for a debt mindset lesson here, before we talk to our guest, I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine a man on the street. This man has $20 million in total debt. Does that sound bad in itself? $20 million is a lot of debt. Well, the only other thing that I'll tell you about this man on the street with $20 million in debt right now is that he is a financial winner. Well, how does $20 million in debt make one a financial winner? Here, let me make a sports analogy for you to help you understand. The NFL quarterback, we're talking American football for those listeners outside the United States, the quarterback that's thrown more interceptions than anyone in their career, he threw an embarrassing 336 of them, which is far more than the second highest person. You're killing yourself and your team when you throw an interception. Well, what's the name of the quarterback that threw all of these errant passes? His name is Brett Favre. Well, Brett Favre is a Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion, and one of the truly greatest quarterbacks of all time. Well, how can that be if he has this ignominious distinction, this disgrace, this shame of throwing all these interceptions to the other team? It is because to even have that many opportunities to throw that many passes at the highest level, he's got to be pretty good. Well, the Green Bay Packers and other teams that he played for, they had confidence in Favre to keep putting him on the field for 2 decades. In baseball, the pitcher that has thrown the most losses of all time has lost an embarrassing 315 games for the teams that he pitched for. He's the biggest loser ever. Well, you know who that biggest loser pitcher ever is? His name is Cy Young, perhaps the greatest pitcher of all time. Yeah, he also won more games than any other pitcher, 511 of them. That's almost 100 more than the next closest pitcher. Cy Young isn't just a Baseball Hall of Famer, but he is so great that although he pitched over 100 years ago, every year today, the award given to Major League Baseball's best pitcher is called the Cy Young Award. So how could the guy that lost more games than any other be coronated with greatness? Well, again, to even get in that position to lose that many games, teams wanted to put him on the field because he also gave you the best chance to win the game. Cy Young just had a really long career. You're going to have more losses. All right, well, back to this fictitious guy on the street that has $20 million in total debt. He's also got $50 million in assets. Well, this makes his net worth a positive $30 million, a winner. Yeah, net worth is assets of $50 million minus liabilities of $20 million. With a $30 million net worth, this makes him a financial winner. See, lending institutions, banks, they would have to have a lot of belief in this guy's financial savvy to ever entrust him with $20 million in debt, much like Brett Favre's interceptions or Cy Young's losses. See, this guy with $20 million in debt also has more assets than anybody. He's clearly creditworthy to even get that much debt in the first place. So someone that works an everyday job and lives below their means, well, they couldn't get $20 million in debt. Now, here on this show, we do talk about how your cash flow is probably more important than your net worth, but they both matter. And all this is really part of the reason that Robert Kiyosaki says, savers are losers, debtors are winners. You might remember that I largely devoted an entire podcast episode to this particular debt mindset topic and the risks and rewards of it. It is called The Debt Decamillionaire. If you think that's going to help you expand your understanding and mindset some more, that is Get Rich Education Podcast episode 260. Well, a lot has been happening in the financial world lately, both inside and outside of real estate, like a new presidential administration still getting set with their economic policies and heightened levels of market manipulation, and rents increasing in the suburbs and decreasing in the most dense urban areas. And there is just more material than I can cover in only doing one weekly podcast. Do you wish that there was more than one show a week here with me in this material? Well, there is an answer for that. I have been writing about much of what I just mentioned and more in our Don't Quit Your Daydream letter, our completely free email newsletter. When you sign up, you do get a welcome series of 6 emails over a couple weeks, and then after that, you receive the letter about weekly. One reason that this is important is that I can write you a letter more quickly than I can produce this show. You can get it now at getricheducation.com/letter. It is actionable, it's free of hype, and just pure wealth building information and context that you can use. I write every word myself. It is sent directly from me to you. Sign up quick at getricheducation.com/letter. Next, let's learn about financial freedom from only 4 single-family rental homes. We're talking to a 29-year-old full-time pharmacist that's created a personal real estate portfolio with a monthly cash flow of exactly $10,755 through single-family home investing, and he's doing it in the most unlikely of places, California. Yeah, he's done this over the course of just 4 years while he's working a busy pharmacy job, and he self-manages his properties, so he expects to retire through real estate investing in 2 years at age 31. Let's talk to him. Welcome to Get Rich Education, Ryan Chaw.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Keith. I appreciate it.
Chaw is spelled Chaw. So Ryan, let's open up and just tell us about your background and how you got into real estate, like how this sounded like an interesting thing in the first place.
So my grandpa actually bought a couple properties in the Bay Area before Silicon Valley was even a thing. This was back in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
And as we all know, when Silicon Valley blew up, those house prices went up like crazy and then rents went up as well. And he was able to retire early and live off the passive income, basically. And not only that, he was able to help pay for fund part of my college tuition and that of my brothers as well. So I realized that real estate is one of the best ways to create generational wealth for people. And I wanted to get started as soon as possible, as you can imagine. I graduated with my doctorate of pharmacy degree in 2015. And then I worked a lot of overtime, saved up as much capital as I could. I really didn't need to work that hard, but I just wanted to get started as soon as possible and wanted to be able to, buy as many properties as possible too when I first got started. So I bought my first property in January 2016, and it was a 3-bed, 2-bath. I bought it for $262,000 in California. And I was able to rent it out by the bedroom to the college town around that area. And because I was able to do that, I was able to actually double my rental income that I could get on that property. So each property I purchase, I usually make around $2,500 to $3,100 in rental income because I rent out by the bedroom.
All right, that's excellent. So with your grandfather, you kind of saw his cup runneth over where he had enough to comfortably retire and help out other family members as well. And you realize that just doesn't happen with a person that invested in mutual funds, 401k or something like that. Oftentimes they're scrounging to get a retirement themselves and they don't have these cup run up over things where they have a good retirement and they're helping out other family members. So that's sort of unusual. And then the way that you invest in property in California is you live in Sacramento, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you found that the numbers didn't quite work as well in Sacramento as they did in Stockton, which is about 45 minutes to an hour south of Sacramento. Mm-hmm. So you did strategically seek out a market that was sort of near you. So tell us more about what led to that market selection, because you're not quite in your own hometown.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually invest in college towns where the college that I look for is colleges that have like pharmacy students, dental students, medical doctors, nursing school, that type of stuff, because I want to find high quality tenants. Usually the college students that I bring into my properties are more mature. They're in graduate school and they're really focused on their studies. So that's why I kind of targeted those types of schools. So for instance, like Elk Grove has CNU, right? Stockton has UOP. And so I specifically look for that type of school, but I also, like they said, make sure that the cash flow makes sense. The price of the property has to be low enough so, I'm getting a good amount of cash flow, a good cap rate. And Sacramento didn't have that excellent cap rate. So just going 45 minutes, an hour south of that, I was able to make it work a lot better.
So we're talking about Stockton, California, and elsewhere, Central California. You talked about some of the incomes that you're achieving from your properties. So tell us about the nature of the properties that you put these oftentimes college students into.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I target usually cookie cutter properties. So 3-bed, 2 baths, where I can add an extra bedroom. So usually if a property is over 1,200 square foot, that usually can become a 4-bedroom property. Anything over 1,500 square foot, usually I can add a 5th bedroom in there as long as I meet the 70 square foot area guideline and the height and there's a window and a door, I can add that extra bedroom. And every extra bedroom that I can add adds an extra $600 to $700 in rental income that I could be making. So I really look for those value add opportunities.
So it's pretty close to a house hack where you're putting a lot of college students in there. And I know to some people, when they think about college students, some certain things come to mind. Maybe people flushing beer cans down the toilet, maybe people deciding to put their motorcycle in the middle of the living room and change the oil right there. But you're specifically targeting sort of better college students, maybe the more studious type. So we're talking about single family homes here where you'll have multiple bedrooms, or it sounds like sometimes you even put 2 people in 1 bedroom in order to generate more rent income. And a lot of times it's college age kids that will still, I guess, accept that condition. A 20-year-old might still accept that.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes we get couples who apply, and so I'll discount the price per couple. So I'll charge maybe like $450 or $500 per couple, and then that would be $900 or $1,000 for that one bedroom. So they're each paying a little bit cheaper than the normal price, but they're a couple, so they want to stay together, so it works out for both of us. I also have a system for identifying high quality tenant. So I have something called the Prime method, and something I teach my mentees. P stands for placement of ads. So you want to place your ads in the place where your target tenants hang out. Placing your ads where the target tenants aren't hanging out is like fishing in an empty pond. You got to go where the fish are. R stands for review of social media. So you want to review their like Facebook accounts, Instagram, see kind of what type of person they are. Do you see any like drugs, alcohol, smoking, rave pictures? So you kind of identify what type of tenant they are. And that's the I, identifying the type of tenant. You also want to determine, like, based off your communication with them, are they going to be trouble down the line? Are they asking for like cheaper rent constantly? Or are they asking for favors before they even move in? That type of thing. M stands for measuring responsiveness. You kind of want to see how fast they respond to you when you're asked for things like paperwork or for bank statements or, qualifying them for income. And the more responsive they are, I find the more responsible they become down the line as well. E stands for ensuring proof of income. So you want to, of course, check it's usually the parents who are paying the rent, which is a great thing for college students, right? Because the parents will always be paying the rent because no parent wants to have their child evicted from the place they're staying at in college, right? So you're always going to get paid rent. And then you just want to make sure that the parent has enough income, especially during COVID and everything, that they can pay the rent.
The Prime method of vetting tenants, PRIME. Did you come up with that yourself?
Yeah, it's just an acronym I came up with, but yes, that's the Prime method.
Well done. You came up with it and you're following through with it successfully, it sounds like, because you are getting a good quality of tenant there. What venues do you advertise through?
Facebook groups works really well. There's Craigslist, anywhere where the target tenant will hang out. So it could be like campus bulletin boards. Sometimes actually, like during COVID, I would contact the student government and ask if they could kind of put out a flyer on the bulletin boards around campus, or maybe send it out to their email list, those kinds of things. Because I did that, even during COVID, I still have 17 tenants and I'm fully occupied in my 4 rentals.
That's terrific that you could still do that in COVID times, since colleges had to make such a substantial shift there as well. Talk to us a bit about the self-management of the properties. You don't live in that close a proximity to these properties, so it sounds like you're a well-thought-out person. I'm guessing you're doing a lot of things up front to help automate a lot of these tenant problems that can invariably and inevitably come up. So tell us about the self-management part. How do you do that with a full-time job and everything else that you're doing?
So for you guys who don't know, I'm a full-time pharmacist, and I actually built this up on the side in the course of 4 years. And it's really crazy how fast it's grown so quickly, because I created these systems and processes that I put in place for anything that comes up. Like, for instance, if something like the toilet breaks, right? I have a contractor team that I can go to and say, hey, the toilet broke. Can you get in there, do the work? And then he'll send me a bill, and then I'll just send him a check. I'll have someone, of course, check the work, and I'll send him a check, and that's all hands off. There's also systems for tenant versus tenant issues. So if one tenant's complaining about another tenant, what I have them do is I have that tenant who complained talk to the other guy face to face, come up with an action plan, implement that action plan. And then if there's still issues, let me know. But ever since, I kind of empowered them to take responsibility to solve the issue, they've been able to solve it, and I don't get any complaints after that. So having those systems in place, basically, if something comes up, then do this. And just optimizing that really makes it self-manageable for your properties. And I have 17 tenants, right? And I'm able to do this while working as a full-time job. So that's really what's key for that.
17 tenants among 4 single-family homes, typically college students. And then for this self-management automation, if you want to call it that, up front, when the tenancy begins, you give them basically a sheet of paper or whatever it is. If you have an electrical problem, call or text this number. If you have a plumbing problem, call or text this number. Is it like that?
Yes, exactly. So there's definitely like house rules at the beginning, right? A sheet of paper with how to handle internet issues. I'll designate one tenant to be kind of like take on additional responsibilities for like if the internet went down, for instance, he could be responsible for calling the internet service to get it fixed up. Because what had happened initially was I was kind of acting as the middleman. I would call up Comcast and they'll say, oh, okay, reset the router. Then I would call up the tenant and say, oh, did you reset the router? And then I'll go back to Comcast and say, it didn't work. And I'll be going back and forth, right? But, what I found, like once you assign responsibilities to tenants and really empower them to take charge of certain situations, it really cuts back on the amount of headache that you have to deal with down the line.
That's wise up front. So you're essentially trying to remove yourself as the middleman, which probably works a lot of times. Do you ever find that any tenants abuse that and maybe they're calling the air conditioner repair person too often when there aren't really problems if you're removed as a middleman?
Any type of major repairs, like if the AC broke down or something, I would have them text me and then I'll triage it. Of course, I'll forward it to the proper contractor to have him come in and fix the issue.
So we're learning how to self-manage somewhat remotely here with real estate investor Ryan Cha. We're going to talk more when we come back. How did he finance these properties? How did he select them in the first place? We're going to dig into some of the numbers and more with how he came up with $10,755 of monthly cash flow. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Ryan Cha. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Most rental property investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market can give you both. Jacksonville, Florida, with 27% lower home prices than the national median, 1% higher gross rents, and Jacksonville has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. To invest for cash flow and growth in Jacksonville, go to cashflowandgrowth.com. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Ridge Lending Group's president, Chaley Ridge. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. And remember, don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Ryan Cha, a real estate investor. He's been doing this for over 4 years now in the most unlikely of places, California. He's kind of house hacking by putting college students into single family homes, oftentimes 4 or more college students in one single family home, and really driving up the rent income that he can get that way. Ryan, let's talk about the numbers. About how much rent do you get in proportion to what purchase price or value of these single family homes?
So what's great is I'm actually able to meet the 1% rule in California. You can rent out each bedroom for about $620 per bedroom. And if you multiply that by 4, that's around $2,500. And if you are able to get like 2 people into one bedroom, that's around $2,700 to $2,750. And if you add that 5th bedroom, it really is a cash cow because you're making $3,100 in rental income for that. So my purchase price on the first one was $262,000, and then the average purchase price on the other 3 were $315,000.
Close to $3,000 of rent income for a $300,000 property. Therefore, you are getting pretty close to that 1%, even in California, because you're doing it in a creative way. So that's what makes this lucrative. It would be much like buying 2 150K properties or 3 100K properties when you get just one 300K one. And it's like you're getting the 1% on all of those. So that's very interestingly done there. How often do you actually have to go and physically visit these properties, since you do have some of this self-management in place with your PRIME acronym?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the last time I actually visited the property in person was a year and a half ago.
Wow.
And that was just to, make sure to close on my last house, the 4th house, and just make sure everything looks good during the final walkthrough of that sale.
Congratulations. I've owned some properties more than 5 years and I've never seen them in my life. I just expected that since you live in somewhat close proximity to them that you might have seen them. So yeah, I mean, this remote ownership and even remote management can be done, especially with all the new build turnkey single family homes that are happening today. You have fewer problems with new builds. So remote ownership and remote management is just so much more possible than what a lot of people are thinking about. So before we talk about the numbers in the property a bit more with respect to how you finance them, tell us more about how you came up with the down payments for these properties. That's a big question for a lot of people. How do I come up with the money? How did you do it?
As a W-2 worker, I actually recommend you keep your job, and you could work overtime, work a second job if you wanted to. That's what I did, but there's a lot of options for you out there. W-2 income workers, they actually get the best financing, conventional financing out there. And right now the interest rates are, I think, 2.5%, which is crazy low. So just getting started as an employee is one of the best ways to go about it. You can actually house hack. And that's something I wish I did when I was, in college, just live in the house and rent it out to your college buddies, because you can put as low as a 3.5% or 5% down payment on the house and really leverage your income there.
It is an inconvenient truth to you, the listener, if you have a W-2 employee job, that is a strong credit to you if you're looking to get conventional financing, much like I financed many of my early properties. I think most of you listeners know I started out with a 3.5% down payment on a fourplex because I didn't have a lot of money. I was trading my time for dollars back then. I was delaying some gratification, and some of that capital formation is important early on to come up with down payments. But here's the thing. If you're about to leave your job, you probably want to qualify for as many loans as you can get right before leaving your job, because that W-2 income is so important to conventional lenders. Did you do anything else with financing creatively, Ryan? Typically with a non-owner occupied conventional loan, it's 80% loan to value loan with 20% down. Is that how you got started since you didn't occupy these at all?
I did, exactly. So I put 20% down, but I actually, on the very first property, it went up in price. It went up actually $60,000 in appreciation. I was able to access that created equity by taking out something called a HELOC.
Yeah.
It's a type of refinance where you can access the equity on your house, pull it out, and actually use that toward a down payment. So I actually used that $60,000 in appreciation toward a down payment on the fourth property that I bought in order to purchase a lot faster and scale faster.
Extracting equity, equity harvesting. You made an equity transfer. HELOC is a home equity line of credit for those that don't know it, where you can get a second loan added on to your first loan, and you can basically draw against it like a credit card. These things are very elastic. You can borrow $60K in a second mortgage off a property, oftentimes at 70 to 80% loan to value, depending on whether it's a rental property or a primary residence. And you can draw all the funds off. You can pay it back as you want to. The nice thing about HELOCs, you probably found out, Ryan, is it is an interest-only payment, typically for at least the first 5 years. And basically what that means is you only have to pay interest. You can pay principal above that if you want to. I love home equity lines of credit. It's actually the way I bought my second fourplex building. I took a HELOC off the first fourplex building that I bought and just transferred that equity into another property. We're talking right here exactly about this is why financially free beats debt free, right, Ryan? I mean, that would give some people some pause to go take out a loan on a property and use it as a down payment for another property, because they might be taking on more total debt, but they might have increased their cash flow and your debt is outsourced to a tenant at the same time.
Exactly. So basically, one of the best analogies I've heard of the HELOC is it's a giant credit card with a super low interest rate. So you're paying maybe a 5-6% interest rate, but because you put that money toward a down payment on another house, you're probably getting anywhere from 10 to 20% cash on cash return. Even though you're putting that 5% interest rate down, right? You're making back a lot higher percentage, 15 to 20%. And so it just makes sense to do it.
You're playing an arbitrage game, borrowing low and investing at a higher rate. And what some people don't realize is because the IRS classifies debt as tax exempt, you don't have to pay any tax either when you take a HELOC and borrow those funds off your home. So it's a really good strategy for a lot of people. It's something that I certainly used myself. Ryan, any other things about problems with tenants or tenants that might not pay the rent? Because in California, we often think of that as a state where we have laws that can benefit the tenant more than they can the landlord, especially when it comes to evictions. It sounds like you've done such a great job of upfront screening. So any particular problems that you've had with tenants? There must have been at least one problem.
Yeah, actually, on my very first house that I bought, I didn't really screen my tenants. I actually put in one of my frat friends, and I knew he was going to be a problem because he's a loud guy. He's very sociable, but he's not a very good tenant. I had a lot of problems with him. He smoked weed when it was illegal back then in California still. He played loud music, and then we had cops called on the house, unfortunately. But then I realized after that, the screening process is so important. Choosing the right tenant who's focused, just the vibe you're even getting from the tenant, right? You can kind of tell who's kind of a more responsible, professional acting tenant versus somebody who's going to be needy, going to ask for cheaper rent and give you a hard time down the line.
The discipline is called property management, but I've often said it ought to be called tenant management because that's where potential problems often come from. Any evictions that you've had with this tight screening that you do?
No, I actually never had evictions. One thing I do actually is I kind of match up the tenants as well. So I'll put some more professional tenants kind of with some less mature tenants as well. And that usually balances things out. The other thing is I try to match people up based off of their major and interest. So I'll have like a house that's designated as the pharmacy house or a house that's the dental school student house. And so, yeah, I mean, it really kind of creates that positive culture for your houses.
Yeah, well done. That's really well thought out. A lot of people in your position, they get tempted to just fill a home with whatever tenant because that solves two problems for them at the same time. That solves the vacancy, meaning that they get their income back. And then secondly, it just solves the problem of them having to get applicants, contact them, and so on. So how do you stay disciplined? Like a lot of people are disciplined enough to think long term and say, no, I need to wait another week or two if that's what it takes to get that right tenant.
That's kind of where that saying comes in, right? Be slow to hire, fast to fire, right? And same thing for tenants. What I recommend is actually, if you're not getting a lot of tenants interested and you're kind of desperate to move a tenant in, is to actually increase your marketing funnel. So like if you're just advertising on Craigslist, for instance, right? Well, why don't you start posting on campus bulletin boards? Why don't you contact the campus housing and ask them, do they have any off-campus housing listings that you can put your ad in? The more you increase your marketing funnel, the more people will be contacting you. And so you can be picky and choosy about who you actually bring into your house. And so that's really the key is creating that volume of tenants who are interested so that you can choose the best ones.
So your grandfather was an inspiration. Real estate investing is a team sport. Did you have any other influential people along the way? Oftentimes you'll have someone in that 4 or 5 years you've been doing this that's a real influencer and gives you a positive direction for real estate investing.
I would say actually my real estate agent. I used the same real estate agent to purchase all 4 properties. And he was a really professional, friendly guy. He also kind of showed me, okay, this is what you should look for. And this is potentially a problem if we purchase this house. He's a real estate investor himself, and he owns, I believe, 5 properties, 5 rentals. So he basically kind of was a mentor to me and really taught me a lot of really in the know type stuff to get started. For those out there just getting started, I highly recommend just finding someone who does exactly what you want to do. If you want to flip, for example, find someone who's done like 10, 20, 30 flips, right? If you want to get into buy and hold single family homes, just find someone who does that. Someone in apartments, right? Find someone who buys apartments or syndicates.
Yeah, doing is knowing, knowing is doing. And yeah, my top criteria for an agent, certainly not my only one, but probably my top one, in addition to character, is are they a real estate investor themselves? They really understand what you need 100%. Do you have any last tips for any newbie? Since, you came to me with the term newbie, even though you've been doing this for a few years, especially with respect to one that's just getting started, whether that's with sort of house hacking the way you've done it or anything else?
As a newbie investor, it's really intimidating to get started. There's a lot of stuff you don't know, right? Of course, you can read up on it and, listen to podcasts. And I highly recommend doing that, visiting this podcast, listening to the stories there. But at some point, you do have to get started. I like to tell people, have the mindset of, there's something called ready, fire, aim. I don't know if you heard of it, but ready, fire, aims means you just get ready, you just put yourself in there, and then you figure it out along the way, because you're not going to have everything perfect at the beginning, but those mistakes along the way and all the things that come up along the way really create that ability for you to become, a successful real estate investor down the line.
Back to you and your path, Ryan. How are you going to know when you're able to quit your job? I know you're 29 now. You plan to quit in about 2 years when you're 31, but it's probably not just your age. It's some other metric. So how will you know when you're there and you can quit your day job and start your daydream?
What I do is I calculate my expenses, and then I figure out how much passive income do I need to be making, like after taxes, to cover all my expenses. So for me, that's around $7,000, $7,500 to pay for all my expenses, but also be able to invest in more assets as well. What I plan to do is pay off the first 3 houses. The first house is actually already paid off. That kind of gives me that peace of mind so that I don't have to worry, even in a downturn. I'm never going to be underwater because I have those 3 mortgages paid off. If I wanted to, I could, like you said, use that HELOC to leverage out my income and use that equity. But having that peace of mind and that $7,500 coming in from those 3 houses allows me to be financially free at the age of 31.
One thing I liked about Ryan when I was getting to know him before today is he has not delayed all gratification, even though he does work a lot of hours as a pharmacist and he's doing real estate on the side like this. You've traveled to a lot of nations to enjoy life and absorb the culture of other nations. Tell us real quickly about that.
Yeah, so I believe there's something called a bucket system where you allocate money to different buckets. So I allocate, if possible, 40 to 50% of my income toward the investment bucket. And then I have a bucket for expenses, like 30%, and then 10% on personal growth. And then the last bucket, the fun bucket, is as long as it's within 10% of my overall income, I'm totally cool spending that money. And the fun bucket includes things like traveling the world, eating expensive dinners, treating your girlfriend out to a nice date. So I've actually been to several countries. I would say I travel before COVID, of course, right? I travel 3 or 4 times a year. So I've been to like Taiwan, Japan, and China. I've been to Europe, like Paris, London, Germany. And so I kind of get to explore all the different cultures out there. And that's what kind of makes life meaningful for me as well. Fulfilling, I should say.
There's something to be said for delayed gratification, but delayed gratification is overrated. And you know what? You're never going to regret a life well lived. Hey, well, this has been great, Ryan, with how you've taken an area of the nation where we don't consider that as generating cash flow. You've done some very creative things in order to make that happen. If our audience wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I offer free PDF on how to basically get started as a newbie investor, and really specifically the student housing market, which I feel, especially outside of California, it's a very lucrative market. You can connect with me at www.newbierealestateinvesting.com. That's www.newbierealestateinvesting.com. And newbie is spelled Newbie.
Ryan Cha, you're diligent. You think long term. This has been interesting. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thanks again, Keith. I appreciate it.
Yeah, innovative techniques from Ryan Cha today with a strict focus on tenant quality, making sure you get self-reliant tenants. And oftentimes college students accept roommate situations or at least shared housing setups. Ryan's PRIME method, that's an acronym that helps reinforce his system, PRIME. P is placement of ads. R is review of social media of his tenants. I is identify the type of tenant. M is measuring responsiveness. And then E is ensuring proof of income. To help him find these properties, he found an agent that is an investor himself. That agent does the work of finding the deals for Ryan. And you will recall, in the hierarchy of what's important to a real estate investor, the team is more important than the property. You might want to treat your key team member to lunch and more. For a lot of people, that's your property manager. For Ryan, that's his agent. In fact, Ryan gave his agent $1,000 as a gift. Well, now, when that agent finds another available property that fits Ryan's criteria, how do you think that he is going to prioritize Ryan? Probably pretty highly. So remember, the market and the team are both more important than the property itself. You are in all of this for the income, but ultimately you're in this for the outcome, converting your income into an outcome. Ryan is living better and giving better than most anyone else, and a residual income stream is what supports that. Your 401k will not support you if you want to take a year off and travel the world. Your 401k is not going to support you if you want to help out a family member in need. Your 401k is not there to support you if you want to donate to a charity. And really, your 401k is not going to support you for anything that you want to do now instead of decades from now, right? I often think of that elderly couple that finally made it to Venice, but then they fell asleep on the gondola. So rather than converting your income into an outcome, conventional retirement plans, they only convert your income into a life deferral vehicle. So we know of a better way. Thanks to Ryan today, we have some educational and actionable shows coming up here on GRE. Stay tuned for those. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.